So the other thing you made me think of is this. I know I was guilty of thinking of it in what you would consider the traditional psychology way, where all of these problematic people, narcissistic people, character disordered people, they must be doing what they do because deep down they have an insecurity, and deep down they're in denial of
That can be true.
right.
That can be true.
Yes.
The deadly assumption is that it's always true.
Right.
That's the deadly assumption.
And I
And
think
by
that
the
was the
way,
assumption, is that
yeah,
it was
and by the
true more
way,
often than not.
yeah, and by the way, so what? So what? If you're loving in the calling out of the maladaptive behavior, and if you're proposing something better, and that something better will fix things, so what? A person will have to face their demons and they'll have to work them through, and you can help them with that.
Right.
But you don't have to devote 1 minute's attention to the underpinnings of the disturbance. It doesn't deserve even it maybe deserves some understanding on your part, some empathy if there are deep roots to it, maybe an abusive childhood experience, et cetera, et cetera. It maybe warrants your understanding, but it has no real place in the turnaround. It's somebody else's own internal business, and you can help them with that, and they will have to reckon with it if you focus on the behavior.
Right. I think, as you would call a lot of neurotic people, I think it gives them a sense of ease when they think, oh, okay, they must just be like me, full of
Exactly.
insecurities. And it makes them feel better to say, oh, they must be covering up an insecurity. They must have really low self esteem.
Right.
And it helps them to see the character disordered person or narcissistic person in a different kind of light.
And it gives them hope that with
Yes.
enough love or with enough attention or enough understanding, things will get better. And there's the problem. There's the problem right there. How's that working for you?
Right.
You've been doing that for 20 years, right? And the therapist has been doing the same thing. How's that working?
Right. And that I was reading a book from a therapist just yesterday where that's exactly what she was proposing to, oh, just be very understanding
Right.
and like that'll get them to see the light. If you're just understanding enough, you don't get sucked into their madness, it'll all be okay.
Yeah.
And I was like, no, Dr. Simon wouldn't like that.
Yeah.
And the way you also described it though too, it made me think that a lot of the character disordered people, it's almost like they've manipulated a lot of the therapists out there to get them to think, oh, yeah, we're just covering up an insecurity. And it
Right.
helps them to kind of pull the wool over their eyes a little bit
Right.
sometimes.
Right. Now, yeah, these dynamics that have to do, let's just take the dynamic of self esteem and narcissism. The dynamics can work either way. For example, I might develop a braggadocious kind of self presentation, a bravado, as a compensation for underlying feelings of insecurity.
Right.
That can happen,
Sure.
but it can work the other way too. I also could have so chronically overestimated my worth because I was so overly praised and so overly indulged and spoiled rotten as a child that I developed no legitimate self respect at all. It can work that way too. But both of those things are irrelevant to the issue of what has to change. And what has to change is the behavior.
Right.
And when it starts to change, then the person has to work on what's been underneath it. Because all of a sudden, their usual way of coping has been stymied. And now they have to figure out, well, what am I going to do to solve this problem, whatever its origins, whether I was overly pampered and indulged and spoiled rotten, or I didn't get enough attention or affirmation, or whatever the case may be. What am I going to do now to properly satisfy these needs and desires? And that's where all the magic happens. Therapists do the same thing relationship partners do. By and large, they waste time and energy trying to get people to see and understand what they probably already see and understand better than you do.
Right. And I know you had a good example in your book, Character Disturbance, about a teenage kid that went into a facility, and almost instantly he had a list, a
Yeah,
laundry list of all these
true,
things
it's a true story. Yes.
that the
All
professionals
the
could be doing better.
identifying information is taken out, but yes.
Right. And one of
Yeah,
the head clinicians there was like, oh, he must be covering up some sort of insecurity that he has
right,
to do all of this. And it's like, well, no, that's kind of leading you down the wrong path. But
right.
I like the way you say it, the behaviors. Focus on the behaviors. It doesn't matter if they're covering up an insecurity or they really just do have that much of a entitled sense of self. It
Right.
doesn't matter. The
And when I say
solutions are
it,
the same.
and when I say that it doesn't matter, I'm not saying that the two aren't connected. What I'm saying is that's the individual's work. And they will actually do the work if you deal with the behavior. They will actually do the work. For example, if a young child really is determined to have that piece of candy, first tries pitching a fit, stomps their feet, screams, and the parent just lovingly says, ain't happening this way. Just not happening.
Right.
Eventually, they might modify their approach to the point where they can get some reinforcement. And that's how we learn. Not this way, but that. Okay.
Another
And
good example. Oh,
yeah,
go on.
they work it out. They're not stupid. They're not stupid. It's theirs to work out. And in that process, they're gaining so much more of the right kind of awareness. Don't do their work for them. Don't lay it all out for them. And don't do the detective work and try to tell them that this is why you are the way you are.
Right.
What's the point? What is the point? I think many times it's for the therapist's own edification. Same thing as you were mentioning earlier for the relationship partner, it's for their own edification. It helps quiet down all the disquiet they feel dealing with this person that hasn't grown up.
Right. And I think, yeah, it is for their benefit. It is for the person dealing with them's benefit to see it that way. And I liked what you also said. You had another example in the book about